Welcome to the EmpowHERment Show, a podcast designed to empower women like you to take control of your lives, make informed decisions, and redefine success on your own terms, beyond the noise of influencer culture.
Okay. Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining today and tuning in. This is our first episode. We're super excited about this. We just wanted to create something for women to have a space to talk about things that affect us, talk about things that maybe stop us from being in full control of our lives, making informed decisions, and hopefully help us kind of redefine what success looks like on our own terms and really beyond the noise of kind of everything that you hear online and influencer culture. Because as much as we love being influenced, sometimes it's nice to get to the bottom of what's really going on, to get advice from experts, people that you can trust, that you can also respect and believe. So it's getting harder and harder to kind of find that kind of thing, to kind of find out what's true. People say that we are living in like a post-truth society and post-facts, but we don't really believe that. We believe there are some things that are still true, and we want to help you find those and surface people that will also help you find those truths and those things that will help you live a better life for yourself. So we are here to help you with agency, with truth, with inclusivity, all of these things that we believe help women live their best lives, bring their best lives, their best selves to everything that they do, which is really, really critically important to us. So my name is Adama. This is Samantha.
Hi. And this is Maddie.
Hi.
The experience of being a woman in the U.S. has changed pretty dramatically, even just between the time my mother was born to now, not to mention my grandmother, or even between the time that I was born and my daughter, who turns 23 this year, was born. There has been so much change. And when you think about that, case in point, my mom bought her first car in the 70s. Her dad had to co-sign for that loan. Years later, my dad was out sick. He had actually been injured in a car accident. My mom's car ran out of gas. I come to find out my mom never even learned to pump gas. My dad and her had been together since she was 14. She was 60 years old. She didn't even know what the gas light was. However, fast forward, my daughter at 23 is very independent, couldn't imagine a man pumping her gas, is fighting for the same rights that my mother just got in the 70s to maintain her autonomy. And so the pendulum has swung so dramatically for women in so many ways, whether that's financial autonomy, whether that's their role in the workplace or in the home, whether that's bodily autonomy. And some of these conversations can be very difficult, but we also want to have fun while we're having them and having them with you.
So we're all at very different points in our lives. I'm going to ask you both the third rail question. How old are we? Sam?
I turned 43 this year.
Love it. Great. Adama?
I just turned 48 in January.
Okay. And I just turned 30 2 weeks ago. I met these ladies almost a decade ago when I was a young gal joining the political sphere in Sacramento, California. I grew up in and around politics, having grown up in a capital city, and my parents work in real estate and they made me move like a million times growing up. So I was like, I'm not doing that. I want to go into politics because that was the only other option. So
The only other option.
Well, perceivably, so I went to UC Berkeley. And I was the girl who joined. I was in college Republicans. I went and interned for the majority leader for the GOP when I was in college. I was on Capitol Hill for a while. And then when I graduated, I joined an all-female political consulting firm, which was interesting. And I had some pretty negative experiences joining politics at a young age. There were a lot of gross men who said things to me or did things to me that just were not okay. And I was really feeling powerless. And then I randomly got an email about a woman named Adama Iwu who was starting a movement called We Said Enough, which was on the heels of the Me Too movement back in 2017. And she and other women, including Sam, were taking a stance against sexual harassment, discrimination, and abuse. And they were asking women in California politics to sign this letter condemning the culture and how systemic it had become. And I just thought that was so badass. And it just so happened that a job that I had applied to at a company to go in-house and do government relations was under Adama. Total kismet, fate, whatever you want to call it. So I got that job. I got to work for Adama for a while. And I also got to get involved with this amazing movement that these ladies started. It was a really life-changing experience because, you know, sexual harassment and discrimination and abuse it's everywhere in politics. It's everywhere in the world.
Yeah.
But my values were really being challenged from a young age because a lot of the people that had done things wrong to me were a part of the party that I had kind of grown up in and like the paradigm that I had grown up in. And these ladies since then have just continued to make me feel safe, supported, empowered. And that's the point of the show. It's called the EmpowHERment Show because they believe and I believe that all women should have the support and the information they need to feel successful and to feel safe. So yeah, that's why we're here. And I'm so thankful to you ladies. I'm incredibly lucky to have you in my life. Let's dive in.
Okay. Well, I grew up in San Diego. I am from Southern California. I'm a California girl. I grew up as a Republican because I grew up as an evangelical Christian. I grew up in the church. And so there really weren't a lot of options when you are evangelical Christian as to what you believe and what your political leanings are. I lived in a really diverse city and I went to a very diverse high school. And one of the first things I remember doing politically was when Prop 187, which basically would have stripped all people who were in California and were undocumented of the ability to access any kinds of public funds. Everybody in my school was so angry about that because San Diego High had such a huge population of kids that came across the border every day to go to school from Tijuana. It was a huge Mexican population in San Diego and at San Diego High. And that didn't make sense to any of us. That type of discrimination and that kind of felt almost arbitrary when so many people are of this population, first descendants of that population, to say, now you cannot access any of the things that you were promised here as an American. And we all walked out and it was so much fun. And at that point, you know, when you're young and you're involved in political movements, I mean, we walked out and we walked across Park Avenue to go to McDonald's. That's kind of what our walk out was. But, you know, it got on the news and our student union got to talk about it and talk about what that meant to us and what it meant to go to a school where it was very diverse and you grew up with people who did not look like you and didn't speak the same language as you. And that was very formative to me. And so it made it very easy by the time that I went to University of San Diego and then moved to Sacramento to do a fellowship with the Schwarzenegger administration. I was like, I actually don't think I'm a Republican at all. As it turns out, you know, I might have still some conservative leanings. I'm not going to lie on some things, but by and large, especially on social issues, yeah, I'm very much a Democrat. And it took me a while to figure that out. But I would definitely say, especially in the last 20 years, one of the things that's been so disappointing to me about politics is how wide that divide has gotten. Because especially in California, there were like the California Republicans, you know?
Yeah,
and
100%.
We all worked together.
That was the crew that I was part of for a while.
Right.
Yeah.
And even though there were some like policy differences, you still could go have a drink with these people after work. You could still go have coffee with them. You could still have very productive conversations.
People even dated across party lines.
Quite a bit, frankly.
Some of us more than others.
Oh, we'll get into that later.
But the members even used to live together. Democrats and Republicans even used to live together.
Yeah.
So, I mean, like, to watch this political divide get further and further apart, as someone who works in politics, that has been incredibly sad to me. But it also makes you more committed to making sure that people do understand your political affiliation, understand what you're voting for, understand what elected officials mean when they're talking about different policies, understand what elections actually even coming up. And I think for women, that is even more important than it's ever been, that you understand what is happening at the local level, because those people will one day, God help you, end up being your U.S. senators. The people who are today on the school board and the city councils, they will end up being the U.S. senators, congressional members.
Or president.
Or president. Or president. Maybe. Sometimes there's different routes to the president.
Clearly.
But more than there used to be.
More than there used to be.
Yeah.
But yeah, I do think it's really, really important for women to be aware of politics and what is going on around you.
100%. Sam, tell us about your experience.
See, I'm a California girl as well. I grew up in the East Bay, the San Francisco area, East Bay. I came from a very, very working class family. My dad worked for the railroad. My mom was a hairdresser. My dad always worked 2 or 3 jobs. I knew very early that my family were very Republican. In fact, I think I must have been in grade school. I remember making snow angels in the living room floor. And one of my parents said, well, how could you vote for Dukakis? Even his name sounds stupid. I also knew very, very early.
So stupid.
That I was not. You know, one experience for me that was very, very transformative and really is one of the reasons that I got into advocacy in the first place was my brother. So my brother and I went to parochial school in the East Bay. My dad worked multiple extra jobs to make sure that we could do that. This was really, really, really early on after IDEA was passed, which is the federal legislation that requires public schools to serve kids with disabilities. That then and now still did not apply to private or parochial schools. So there was a kid on campus who had some pretty severe behavioral health issues. He brought a 9-iron golf club to school in the first grade for reasons I still don't understand, had an altercation with my brother and basically assaulted him on campus. My brother almost died, had a traumatic brain injury, spent months in the hospital. A several-year lawsuit ensued most of my childhood. And of course, in the middle of that lawsuit, parochial school was really off of the table. My parents went back to the Alameda County School District and sought resources under IDEA for the type of classes they could put my brother in to help him with the learning disabilities that he developed as a result of this traumatic brain injury. And they were basically told that they were going to put him in the class for, quote, retarded kids. That was what they called it at the time in the early 80s. And that he would get a supplemental certificate rather than a degree. And basically my parents would be lucky if he was ever self-sufficient enough to sweep the floors in the McDonald's up the street. My mother found that to be totally unacceptable, said that she was going to pull us all out of school and homeschool us. They said, you, ma'am, are nothing but a hairdresser. We will find you truant and take your children away. And so to our knowledge, my mom was one of the first people in the state to petition for the right to homeschool children in the absence of a suitable special ed program. She won. She pulled us all out for a few years. And that to me was really a lesson in sort of advocacy for yourself or your family. And moving forward, you know, when I had my daughter, I was very young. I got pregnant at 19, like any good Irish American girl would do with my high school boyfriend. And, you know, realized very quickly as a person who was very young with no money and a baby that I too would have to advocate for services. And so it's always just come to me honestly that if you need something from your government, you have to petition them. You have to show up. You have to demand the thing that you need for your family.
That's in the Bill of Rights.
Indeed it is. I sort of started getting put on all of these commissions, like the Child Care Commission, probably because I was a really, really squeaky wheel. And unfortunately for the elected officials who appointed me, I think they hoped it would quiet me down. It did not. I got more engaged in politics, and it's my profession. And I will just say, even though I didn't really know what political engagement was, other than by the example of my mother, I did want to be a lawyer or a professional wrestler, like one of the Glow women, when I was a kid. And so my job is basically like if those two things
oh my God, it really
were
is.
one job. Yeah.
Oh, that's wild.
We're going to get into that in a future episode too. Can't wait. And I'll never forget in 2008 when President Obama ran, he gave a speech at one point and he was talking about how people have help along the way and you don't achieve success wholly on your own. And he used a phrase, you didn't build that. Of course, Republicans went crazy, including my father, because literally he builds homes and he was being told that he hadn't built his business. And me at the age of 13, hearing some politician tell my father, who I idolized, that he didn't create that success on his own, that was a very formative experience. And for the next decade or so, I did like Young Republicans. I was a California youth delegate at Mitt Romney's convention. I was in California College Republicans at UC Berkeley.
That must have been wild.
To say the least. And then when I was a senior in college, that's when Hillary Clinton ran against President Trump. When he was first running for president.
A decade ago.
And that was a wild year because I voted for Hillary Clinton and everybody was shocked because I was just known as, the Republican girl. And I was, that was my brand.
Republican Barbie.
Maybe I should make that my handle, not the Corbin cat lady. Republican Barbie. Anyway, so I voted for Clinton and, Thanksgiving was interesting. And That was kind of when it felt like my identity was like coming apart, because all of a sudden, like, the values I grew up with and the beliefs I had weren't resonating anymore. But simultaneously on the Berkeley campus, you know, like, I would be called a misogynist or a racist or a hypocrite or whatever, simply because.
Have any of us had a good Thanksgiving? If you have like a family that is like,
I was going to say my Thanksgivings have been real interesting.
Holidays in general bring out a lot of
conversation.
Yeah. Passing strangers in the street.
President's Day.
Yeah.
The 4th of July.
Your birthday,
My brothers gave my dad on
Black
Fox
Republicans
News.
find the worst gifts. Michelle.
On Fox News, you know, the My Pillow guy, there's also those ads for, like, Simply Balanced or, like, Simply Nature, like, the supplements. Have you seen these ads on Fox News?
I don't have cable, so.
Smart. Hence this show. Anywho, my brothers got my dad that as a joke. But long story short, yes. So politics has just become this it used to be like my identity, and it's just become this very incendiary thing.
It could also be something you could talk to people about.
Yes.
To fail
Yes.
about.
And like, I have always been able to talk to like ladies like you about it, because like, you're logical and you also see things from all possible angles, because you have to by nature of the kinds of jobs you have. And anyway, I think something that we're just going to try to impart through this show is that your political affiliation should not be your identity. Politics matters, as we've discussed, and like, you should pay attention to your local politics especially. But like, we all have lives, and we should know that people are multifaceted. Just because people grew up a certain way or thought a certain way at one point doesn't mean that they are that person now. It's okay to change your mind. And in fact, you should change your mind, because that means that you're learning and growing. Okay, we're now going to totally pivot and give you a teaser of some fun topics that we'll talk about on future episodes. Relationships, dating, all the things. Adama. I want to hear what's going on in Adama's love life.
I like how you always ask me that, like, the answer is going to be different. So I'm just going to be super honest with people. I do not date. I do not think it is worth my time. I think it is a huge waste of time. I do not want to get married. I am not trying to have children. I do not have any friends, even friends who are very happily married, who are like, oh yeah, Adama, what you got to do is run out and get married. I do not participate in low ROI activities. And the thing that men and low ROI like have in common, it's like a very defined Venn diagram, and I'm out.
Okay. Venn diagram here, Adama here. Got it. Sam, what about you?
So I married my high school boyfriend.
To be clear, it's not like I don't like men. I just think long term, they don't pan out as an investment.
You just think they're not worth your time, which is fair. Carry on.
So I married my high school boyfriend, my first high school sweetheart. That did not last, though it persisted, just not forever. And the best gift he ever gave me actually was getting remarried, because now I kind of like have a wife also. So high ROI, by the way.
See?
Thanks, Annette.
Literally had to bring another woman into his own equation for him to be.
Love you, Nanette.
That's awesome.
So, and then I've had a handful of relationships that have, for the most part, been quite long. And I do love men. I love dating. I love being in a relationship. Not so true. I don't like dating. I like being in a relationship.
You just want to skip the hard part.
Yeah. If we could just sort of like, just go kind of like, have you ever heard like of your lesbian girlfriends, the U-Haul lesbians, like we go on one date and then you just put it in U-Haul and now you've moved in?
Yeah. I've never heard of this, but okay.
I'm into this. This is me.
You in San Francisco.
Live under a rock.
This is my preference, but for men. And even though like the logical side of my brain recognizes, based on an ample sample size, that men, can sometimes be like bad for your mental health, bad for your physical health, bad for your other relationships, hard on your career. Finances, right? Could actually literally scientifically take years off of your life.
A bad marriage can kill you.
Anyway,
It's pretty bleak.
I still love men. I still love men.
Against all odds.
Against all odds. I believe in love.
I'm married. Happily.
And you're the picture of health.
Thank you. Thank you. I am married to a kiwi, I will say, which for those of you who don't know, the kiwis are actually birds. They're not fruit. like, you know, like the kiwis you eat. They call that kiwi fruit.
But he's neither a bird or a fruit.
No. We just went very meta. He's from New Zealand. He and I went to college together. He did not know who I was. I knew who he was. Many years post-grad, I lived in San Francisco for 4 years before I moved to New York for a bit. And I felt like I dated every possible worthy bachelor in the city. And I was ready for a change, and I was on my way to New York, and I was on a trip to Cabo San Lucas with some girlfriends, and, you know, naturally some tequila had been consumed. And I was scrolling Instagram looking for, you know, my next...
someone to shoot her shot at.
Literally. I stumbled upon Nathan.
I loved that Maddie, by the way. That was a fun Maddie.
Yes. I would like to think she's still here, but she's just married. Anyway, because it worked. So I saw a photo of Nathan on Instagram, and I was like, my long lost college crush. He's still alive. He lives halfway across the globe. He was in London at the time. But I slid into his DMs, and God, in hindsight, I wrote like a novel. Like, I was basically explaining to him how, like, I was surprised to see him on my feed because he was tagged by a friend of mine from Sacramento, and he was at his brother's wedding in Mexico.
You have never got into that level of detail. I thought you were just like, hey, what's up?
No, the screenshot of my DM was at my wedding at the bar. That's what she was like.
All that writing?
That was me.
You know, this just means that when you're hot, you can be crazy.
Yeah.
Just saying.
Oh, God. Yeah, so he responded, probably because he was like,
I don't know that I realized that's what that was.
That was me shooting my shot. Yeah, confessing my love. I don't know.
Like a dissertation.
God, I've always seemed crazy now. First I'm Republican Barbie, and now I'm the woman who writes novels on Instagram. Anywho, guys.
I mean, in fairness, I would put you on any project to manage.
It worked. You responded. Yeah, it worked. And we were married like exactly 2 years later. And we've been now married for a year and a half or so. He's great. I will say he's a foreigner. Like, I think there's something about American men.
Well, so he could get you out of the country if you need to.
True that. So, and I have not given up that potential. So
this is why Adama and I are going to take a road trip over to Ireland for a couple of weeks.
And that seems like a smart idea.
We probably need to do something else.
Okay. Now we're going to pivot, and Adama is going to tease our next episode.
So on our continual quest to find truth and to talk about things that are important to all of us, we want to definitely talk about health. And we are very, very fortunate because a very good friend of ours, Nancy Robles, who is an incredible nurse. She has a master's in nurse administration, and she is a physician assistant, incredibly qualified. She works at a very, very highly regarded world-class cardiac center here in the Bay Area. And one of the things that I thought was really interesting is that she told me recently that the number one drug that she's prescribing for her patients as they are waiting for heart transplants are GLP-1s, Ozempic, Mounjaro, and drugs like that. Because the best thing that you can do as you are waiting for a life-saving operation is to continue to improve your health and get healthy. So I thought that was really fascinating. There's been so much conversation about them lately. Yeah. I thought it would be really
good, bad, and ugly.
That's right. I thought it would be great to have Nancy, a true healthcare professional, come in and have a conversation with us about what these drugs are, how they work, who takes them, who should be taking them, what the benefits are, what the drawbacks are.
Is she going to talk about Ozempic face?
I mean, I think you should ask her about
Let's
it.
ask. I have so many questions. Okay. Thank you all for tuning in to our first episode. Follow us on social media, subscribe, and we'll see you next time. Bye.